Good morning, everyone. Class SYBSC third semester, paper number first, that is animal diversity third. In that animal diversity third, the last lecture we are studying about the chapter number 6, study of Scoliodon. In that study of Scoliodon, next system are nervous system. The nervous system of Scoliodon comprises the central nervous system, including the brain and spinal cord, and the peripheral system, comprising the cranial and spinal nerves and the autonomic nervous system. Firstly, we are going to study about brain of Scoliodon. The brain is a soft whitish organ, relatively large size, and lies in the cranial cavity of the skull, and it may be divided into three parts, that is forebrain, midbrain and hindbrain. स्कॉलियोडॉनचा ब्रेन सॉफ्ट आहे, व्हाईटिश ऑर्गन आहे, व्हाईटिश कलरमध्ये आहे आणि लाईज इन बिटवीन द क्रॅनियल कॅव्हिटी ऑफ द स्कल क्रॅनियल कॅव्हिटी प्रेझेंट ऑन हेडच्या मध्ये क्रॅनियल कॅव्हिटी प्रेझेंट असेल, कॅनियल कॅव्हिटीच्या तिथे ब्रेन आणि ब्रेनपासून काय स्टार्ट होणार टेलपर्यंत स्पायनल कॉर्ड. अँड दिस पार्ट ऑफ ब्रेन कॅन बी डिवायडेड इन टू थ्री पार्ट्स, दॅट इज मिड ब्रेन, हाइंड ब्रेन अँड फोर ब्रेन. This is the diagram shown the structure of brain. First is dorsal view, second is lateral view, and third one is the horizontal longitudinal section. These three sections, all each and every part of the brain are described here. आपण ते नंतर एक्सप्लेन करताना पाहूयात. फर्स्ट पार्ट जो आहे ब्रेनचा, दॅट इज फोरब्रेन. Forebrain is the brain of a brain is a The forebrain comprises olfactory lobe, cerebrum and diencephalon. फर्स्ट जेव्हा ब्रेन कन्सिडर करू तो ब्रेन तीन पार्टमध्ये डिवाइड होते, फोर ब्रेन, मिड ब्रेन आणि हाइंड ब्रेन. आणि हे तिन्ही पार्ट परत सब डिवायडेड होतात, परत त्यांच्या डिव्हिजन्स पडतात. मग आता हा फोर ब्रेन जो आहे तो तीन पार्टमध्ये डिवाइड होतो. कुठला? ऑल्फॅक्टरी लोब्स, सेरेब्रम अँड डायन्सेफॅलॉन. आता मिड ब्रेन दोन पार्टमध्ये डिवाइड होतो, ऑप्टिक लोब अँड क्रुरा सेरेब्री. हाइंड ब्रेन हा दोन पार्टमध्ये डिवाइड होतो, सेरेबेलम अँड मेडुला ऑब्लंगेटा. असे पूर्ण किती पार्ट पडतात? 7 पार्ट असतात ह्या ब्रेनचे. पहिला जो फोर ब्रेन आहे, इट इज डिवायडेड इंटू थ्री पार्ट्स. इन दॅट फर्स्ट इज ऑल्फॅक्टरी लोब. A pair of stout and stalks, the olfactory tract or peduncles, extend forward and outward from the anterolateral angles of the cerebrum. Cerebrum पासून anterolateral angles ने forward and outward director ने the pair of stout and stalk of the olfactory tracts or peduncles extend. पेडुंकल म्हणजे काय? ऑल्फॅक्टरी लोब is connected to the cerebrum by the help of olfactory peduncle. पेडंकल म्हणजे जेव्हा आपण लीफचं पेडंकल माहिती आहे ना, लीफ आणि झाडांच्या त्या फांदीला अटॅचमेंट ज्याने लीफची असते त्याला पेडंकल असं म्हणतात. So this olfactory peduncle is present and olfactory lobe can be attached to the cerebrum. Cerebrum, it is the part of forebrain attached by the help of olfactory peduncle. Each olfactory tract ends into a large bilobe mast and the olfactory bulb, which is closely applied to the olfactory or nasal sac of its side. The olfactory tract and bulbs enclose a narrow cavity, the olfactory ventricle or rhinocele. The latter are continuous behind with the lateral ventricles of the cerebrum. The olfactory lobes are concerned with the sense of smell. ऑल्फॅक्टरी लोबचा मेन फंक्शन काय? सेन्स ऑफ स्मेल. लक्षात ठेवा, दिस इज द इम्पॉर्टंट फंक्शन ऑफ ऑल्फॅक्टरी लोब इज सेन्स ऑफ स्मेल. नेक्स्ट पार्ट इज सेरेब्रम. Cerebrum, it is after olfactory lobe, then olfactory peduncle, and the olfactory peduncle is attached to the cerebrum. Cerebrum, it is the second part of forebrain. It is the large, somewhat rectangular mass with a smooth surface and anterior part of the brain. It is undivided with no median groove to divide the cerebrum into the right and left cerebral hemisphere. It enclosed a pair of cavities, the lateral ventricles or paraseals, separated from each other by a median partition. असं काही पार्टिशन प्रेझेंट नसतं त्या सेरेब्रममध्ये की लेफ्ट हेमिस्फेअर सेरेब्रल हेमिस्फेअर किंवा राईट सेरेब्रल हेमिस्फेअरमध्ये त्यांना डिवायडेशन होईल. बट अज्युम केलं जातं की दिस इज द मीडियन पार्टिशन प्रेझेंट इन बिटवीन द सेरेब्रम अँड इट इज द डिवायडेड इन टू लेफ्ट cerebral hemisphere and right cerebral hemisphere. The paracel communicates behind with the third ventricle of diencephalon by a sigma-shaped interventricular foramen or foramen of Monro. In between the cerebrum, there are the cavity or some cerebral cavity, forebrain cavity is present, which is called as paraseals. जसं अज्युम केलं जातं मीडियन पार्टिशन दोन लेफ्ट आणि राईट डिवायडेशनसाठी. सो in that in between this cerebrum some cavity is generated and this cavity is called as paraseals. It communicates behind the third ventricle. Ventricle, it is nothing but the part of heart, but it is connected by the brain of that skeleton. It is the ventricles of diencephalon and by the sigma shaped due to ventricle connected to the diencephalon, it is the derived or it is formed a sigma shaped sigma, it is a letter we are studying into the math, the sigma shaped interventricular foramen or foramen of Monro. The roof of the lateral ventricle remains the thin to form a pallium and their floor thickens to form the corpus striata. On the ventral side, the cerebrum has a small median pore, the neuropore, through which enter a pair of zero or terminal nerves coming from the olfactory capsules. Each nerve bears a minute ganglion on its course. The cerebral hemispheres are seat of intelligence, memory and voluntary movements. सेरेब्रल हेमिस्फेअर्स आपण जे अज्युम केलं होतं लेफ्ट आणि राईट सेरेब्रल हेमिस्फेअर्सचं डिवायडेशन मीडियन partition through. So this cerebral hemisphere, function of cerebral hemisphere is seat of intelligence, memory and voluntary movements. याच्या आधी जो फर्स्ट पार्ट होता forebrain's olfactory lobe. The function of olfactory lobe is the sense of smell, and the third part is cerebral hemisphere. It is function of cerebral hemisphere is seat of intelligence, memory and voluntary movements. After that, the third part of forebrain is diencephalon. The cerebrum continues posteriorly into a narrow short diencephalon completely covered by a forward prolongation of the cerebellum. It encloses a laterally and compressed cavity, the third ventricle or diocele continuous behind with the ether. The lateral wall of the third ventricle are thick and it is called as thalami. Its roof is extremely thin, membranous vascular termed as a tilla choroidi. The numerous folds of tira choroidi project into the third ventricle, forming the anterior choroid plexus. The posterodorsal end of the diencephalon from the roof of the third ventricles give rise to a pineal stalk ending in a round knob and which are called as pineal body. The third ventricle extends into the base of the pineal stalk. The floor of the third ventricle, the hypothalamus, sends a large backwardly directed down growth, the infundibulum. The infundibulum comprised of a large pear-shaped median lobe and a pair of small oval lateral lobe, the lobi inferiors. The median lobe of the infundibulum has an oval body. The hypophysis developed as an outgrowth from the buccal cavity, and the distal part of the median lobe of infundibulum and the hypophysis together forms the pituitary body. On the sides of the hypophysis lie large thin wall vascular sacs, the saci vasculosi, act as a pressure receptors. The crossing of the optic nerve, the optic chiasma lie in front of the infundibulum. The anterior wall of the third ventricle is thin and it is called as lamina terminalis. The diencephalon acts as a relay center in conveying impulses to the cerebrum and as an integrating center of the autonomic nervous system and perceives the sensations like heat, cold and pain. The diencephalonचं function काय आहे? Autonomic nervous perceives the sensations like heat, cold and pain. पहिल्यांदा forebrain is divided into three parts, that is olfactory lobe, cerebrum and diencephalon. Function of olfactory lobe is to sense of smell and the function of cerebrum is to seat of intelligence, movement and memory and voluntary movements, and the function of diencephalon is to sensation the like heat, cold and pain. आता next part is midbrain. The midbrain consists of optic lobes and crura cerebri. Midbrain is also divided into two parts, optic lobes and crura cerebri. First is optic lobe. They are a pair of rounded bodies of medium size on the dorsal side of the brain and also called as corpora bigemina. They are completely covered by the cerebellum. Each optic lobe encloses a large cavity. The optical ventricle or mesocele opens medially into the ether. The optic lobes are associated with the sense of sight. Next one is crura cerebri. These are the thick bands of the nerve fibers running anterior-posteriorly on the ventral side of the brain, connecting the hindbrain with the forebrain. They are partly hidden by infundibulum and associated structures. The crura cerebri carry the sensory impulses from medulla oblongata and spinal cord to the thalami and hence to the pallium. The third part of brain is hindbrain. The hindbrain comprises cerebellum and medulla oblongata. First is cerebellum. It is a very large extending front as far as the cerebrum and partly overhanging the medulla oblongata behind. Its dorsal surface is irregularly folded, divided into three lobes by the two transverse furrows. The cerebellum encloses a cavity, the cerebellar ventricle or metacele, and opens below into the ether. A pair of prominent, irregular, thin wall sacs lies on the side of the anterior part of the medulla oblongata, partly overlapped by the cerebellum. These are known as the corpora restiformia, restiform bodies or auricular lobes, and correspond to the floccular lobes of the birds and mammals. And each auricular lobe receives an extension of the metacele called as auricular recess. The cerebellum maintains the equilibrium and coordinates the voluntary movement. Cerebellumचं फंक्शन काय आहे? टू मेंटेन द इक्विलिब्रियम अँड कोऑर्डिनेट द व्हॉलंटरी मुवमेंट, म्हणजे सेरेब्रम सोबत ते काम करतात. सेकंड पार्ट इज मेडुला ऑब्लंगेटा. Medulla oblongata, it is the posterior most part of the brain, wider in front and tapering behind to merge with the spinal cord because it is the last part of brain, and it involves a wide triangular cavity, the fourth ventricle or myocele, connected in front with the third ventricle by a median longitudinal channel and the ether or aqueduct of sylvius. The floor and sides of the fourth ventricle are thick, roof is thin, non-nervous and vascular term the tela choroidi. It sends into the fourth ventricle a number of vascular folds forming the posterior choroid plexus, and the medulla oblongata controls the involuntary movement of the internal organs. All the ventricles of the brain are continuous and contain a lymph-like fluid which is called as cerebrospinal fluid. This fluid is secreted by the anterior and posterior choroid plexus. So this is all about the nervous system of Scolioton. Remaining system is discussed in next lecture. Thank you.